I've completed 365 days of game development and I'm going to show you what I achieved. I spent the first few months of 2023 learning about C# and also doing some of the Unity Learn pathways and just getting familiar with the engine. And in March, I started planning my first project. For my first ever game, I wanted to make a platformer and I came up with the idea that I would have a samurai girl and she would be getting back some stolen treasure. Hence the name Samurai Girl. I spent a lot of time making the pixel art for this game and I'd never done that before, but I kind of winged it and it turned out decently because I was good at doing general digital art. I added some enemies, one melee and one that could shoot fireballs. And you might be thinking, this looks pretty good for a first game. Or maybe not. But I used so many tutorials on this and I just pieced them together so it's not as impressive as it looks, and don't be fooled. But I actually finished the game and it was complete with a main menu and a win/game over screen. And I included sound effects and music too. So I completed this game by April and then nothing. I did nothing until one day in July I was thinking, oh yeah, I started doing game dev. Should probably carry on with that. So I continued my journey and I thought I would do a 3D endless runner game. I mostly use free low poly assets from the Unity store, but I actually modeled my main character in Blender, which was a first. And I think it came out pretty well. I called this game Lost Fairy and it had a very deep backstory about this fairy who was lost and she was running home. This is the first time I actually used the built-in character controller in Unity and I didn't have a great experience with it, but I blame that on me just not knowing how to use it. I basically produced a load of these tile prefabs where I would create different obstacles on them and then they would spawn in, making the game feel endless. And I kept the game very magical feeling. This was the first time I used particle effects and I had a lot of fun creating them for the fireflies in the game and also the poisonous mushroom bubbles. I have to say I got really bored of this project towards the end because it was very repetitive creating all the prefabs. I just kind of rushed and that's why the UI looks like this. But I built it and I put it on my phone, and there is something about playing your own game that you made on your phone and it working. It just feels so good. Shortly after finishing Lost Fairy, I started posting on my YouTube channel, but my content was more geared towards Unity and game dev. And this is when I had the revelation that I had been making games wrong because I still wasn't understanding what I was making. So I decided to go more basic, and that's when I decided to do the Stardew Valley Egg Hunt clone game. And I went about this project very differently. I did none of the art and I actually waited till I finished the game to even add art into it. And it didn't take me long to make, but I felt really confident in my code and I could 100% explain what was going on, which was a really nice feeling because I hadn't felt like that before. And from this point on, I kind of made a little agreement with myself that I wouldn't leave such a big gap between projects, and also I would only use my own code on projects because otherwise I wouldn't really make progress. So like I promised, my next project was only 1 month later, and this was my procedurally generated island game. Here my project wasn't really a game, it was more just about the procedural generation aspect. And I had watched loads of videos on procedural generation, so I was wondering whether I could make it on a basic level. And this was definitely trickier than my last project, but I just broke it down into little bite-sized pieces. I used so much raycasting in this project, I am probably an expert by now. And it was basically a lot of checking for collisions and conditional logic. I made a YouTube video about the whole process, and I also included some final reveal shots that were really fun to film in Unity because I'd never used the dolly track where you can rotate the camera and like direct your own movie. The finished project wasn't perfect, and looking back I would do a lot of things differently, but that's a good thing about trying things. It's all about figuring out different ways of achieving the same thing. Now we're coming towards the end of the year, and on day 363 I uploaded my YouTube video on the game Let's Make Tea. This was different to all my other project ideas, and I was at a point where I felt like I could just run with my idea and work out the how later, which was such a contrast to me at the beginning of the year. I really enjoyed doing the art for this game because I had a very specific vision and I wouldn't be able to find free assets for it. And it was a point and click experience, let's say. Even though it was the simple idea of making a cup of tea, it had a lot of logic behind it. In this project, I had a lot of fun learning about shaders, as I never made one before, but I made one for the glowing coals and also the fire particles, which was so in line with what I imagined. I was so happy with how it turned out. This was by far the best looking game that I had made to date, and it was so cozy and relaxing to play. I love the little details like the rain in the window and also the steam coming from the pot. This sums up my projects from the last year, and I think when comparing myself to myself, I've definitely made a lot of progress. I'm not sure what my next project will be, but make sure you subscribe so you don't miss it. But other than that, I'll see you next time.